Okay, so let's start off with attempt number 2 of recording this little project. In the first attempt that I recorded the entire project without pressing that little red button on my microphone, I just recorded the entire project without any tone. Okay, so this is attempt number 2. We are going to learn about modules, ES6 modules, using modules in JavaScript. So in the upcoming minutes, I'm going to show you what are JavaScript modules, how you can create and use JavaScript modules, what is the difference between a named export and a default export, and also going to, of course, give a example. We're going to build a little application. The exact application that we're going to build is this right here, this little to-do list that is going to allow you to add to-dos. If you click on the add task or add tasks, of course, it's going to show you a little alert because it didn't add anything in here. So like and subscribe will be your task, of course. And if you complete it, this and this, then we can get started with the project. So I'm going to drag this to the right side and this little fella to the left side. Let's make it actually a bit smaller. We're going to do the following. Let's also zoom you out. Now, because I already did this, there is already a repository. I started out my previous one with a repository. I created a repository. The repository is only created for you to be able to download the code later on, also compare the code. Now, there are two things. Initially, I started the repository and then grab onto the main CSS file, which is down in the description below. This is the CSS file that I'm using for all of my projects. And it also grows. It's basically a huge CSS file. You can take a look here. Well, I have a lot of code, a lot of code with a bunch of classes that I'm using for all my projects. So you can download it from here. You will see it on my GitHub repository. If you search on GitHub for Norbert CSS-framework, you're going to see this repository. There's just a CSS file in there. Okay, so let's close this one up. Now I'm going to clone this repository, and let's just go ahead, use git clone. I'm going to go to my GitHub account. If not, you know how to clone this. You can just go here and go to files or download the files. Pretty much irrelevant. Okay, so let's go ahead, clone this repository. I'm going to go into my YouTube projects, clone it here, and of course, open up in a new folder. So when I'm going to push something up here, it's going to be the new files. So what I'm going to do is, well, the CSS file, I'm going to leave it in here, but I'm going to delete the main.js and everything that I have here in my modules because I'm going to start everything from scratch. So let's delete this main and let's delete everything that is in the modules. Perfect. Now, if I do now a git add and git commit, and I'm going to add here a temp2 and then git push, you should see now that the Git repository, if I do here refresh, is now, well, not empty, but it only has these files. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to close up my little command line here, and let's get started with our CSS file. Whoa, I forgot about this. Let me change up this theme. There we go. Theme, color theme, and let's just go with the regular dark mode. Boom, there we go. Also, I'm going to delete everything that's in here, and let's have a fresh start so you know what is happening. Okay, so we just have an index.html file within here. Let's first link up our CSS file. So create a link, then link up your style.css or main.css, whatever we want to name it after. And then as a title, ES6 modules. Let's also open this up. Let's also create an h1 here with a class of title. So class title is going to send this into the center, and oops, we don't have anything in that title. So let's add here. I was missing the body tag, actually accidentally deleted it. Okay, so the opening body tag is here, and let's create here a to do and list. Perfect. Now you should see this, and it should also automatically be styled because it's using the styles from my style file. Perfect. Now let's talk a bit about modules. So what are modules? Well, when you're working with modules in JavaScript, actually JavaScript allows you to organize, or modules allow you to organize your JavaScript code into multiple files. And then you can reuse and maintain those files more easily because you're just going to import them. Actually, first of all, you're going to export each and every file using a default export or a named export. I'm going to take a look at that just in a couple of seconds. So you're going to export those files and you're going to import them in a main module file. Now, modules are reusable pieces of code that can be exported from one program and imported into another program. So that's the basics of it. Now, why use ES6 modules? Well, there are a couple of particular reasons why you would use modules. And let's just go by example by separating code with similar logic into files called modules. You can do the following. You can find, fix, and debug code more easily, of course, because you know exactly where the problem is. You can also reuse and recycle different logic in different parts of your application. And I'm going to also take a look at that because I'm going to create utility functions that are going to be specifically in one file. Then I'm going to create components that are going to be in another file and also folder. And you can reuse those specific components, also reuse those specific utility functions. You can keep your information private and protected from other modules, and most importantly, prevent pollution of the global namespace and potential naming collisions. So what do I mean by that? When you're going to create a variable, it's going to be specific to that file. Okay, so not going to be globally scoped. Excepting what I'm going to show you just in a couple of minutes when we're going to take elements from the DOM and export them in the main module. So each and every module can have then access to them, so or each and every script file. Okay, so in conclusion, modules in JavaScript are reusable pieces of code that can be exported from one program and imported into another program. That's all you need to know. Now, how we create and use modules, that is the next topic. So let's go ahead and create right here let's call it app or main.js file. You know what? I'm going to call this main. Although I have it with the app, I'm going to call this main, so you know this is the main file. So let's just go ahead and console log here main file, main.js file. And now I'm going to go ahead, go into my index.html and create here, of course, a script tag. And the script tag I'm going to use as the source that main.js file. Now, if we open up our console, right click, and I'm going to move my console now down. There's a console and move it down. You should see here main.js file and log to the console, meaning that the file was loaded. Now, as I said, modules are files that are exported and imported into another program. So let's go ahead and create a module. First of all, I'm going to create a folder called modules. And I'm also going to use here, let's go to extension, let's search for material icons. And let's set it to material icons. Exactly. Okay, so search in extensions for material icons, then install it. I already have it installed, but I usually not using this when I'm teaching, just to keep everything simple. But what I wanted to show you that this folder will now be recognized. Okay, you typed in modules, so this means that it's going to, as you can see, here's a little puzzle piece. It's going to contain multiple files. Then you can then puzzle them together and create a module. So first things first, we're going to create here a new file. We're going to call it elements.js or get elements. Let's call this get elements. Get elements. Now, if you guessed it, this file is going to get all of the elements from the DOM. Now, let's go ahead and get a element from the DOM. Let's say we're going to get this h1. Okay, so const h1, and let's say document dot query selector, and I'm going to select the h1. So the quickest way possible to select an element. And now I'm going to use this h1 in my main file. So in order to use it, I'm going to export it. I'm going to export it as a default. So what I mean by that, first we're going to use the export keyword, export. Then I'm going to use the default value, default. And then I'm going to use a function. And in this function, we're going to export, also don't have word wrap activated, going to export, and it should be default, this little cons. Now, when we're exporting, we need to explicitly return it. So we're going to return here that little h1. Now, in order to have access to it, we need to import it in our main file. And let's also, I'm going to console log it once here, console log h1, and then I'm going to show you how we can later on use those elements in the main container. Now we need to go to our main file, and let's say here we're going to import, and now we need to tell it what we're importing. Now, because this is exported as default, we can actually use any kind of description we want. You can say that's going to be the DOM elements. Okay, and now we need to give it the path. So when we're importing, we're naming it here. This is only working by default export. So we're giving it the name, and now we're going to tell it from, and we're going to export it or import it from /modules, the file name, get elements, and .js. You need to specify it, okay? Now this little error will occur. Cannot use import statement outside a module. What does this mean? Well, if you go back to our HTML file, you will see down here that your script tag is using as a source a regular JavaScript file. Now, in order to use a module file, you need to add the type of the script that you're importing as module. And if you do that, then you should see this import. You should no longer see the error. Now, in order to activate this, you can see we're actually exporting a function. We now need to trigger this function. So, although I named it in here as get elements, or actually didn't name it as anything, so function get elements, I can import it here with a different name. So if I go ahead and DOM elements and activate this function or run the function, you will see here the h1 being exported or console logged. Okay, now let's actually add some HTML, and I'm going to add it by copying and pasting it in here. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to go step by step. So first things first, I'm going to add up here, I'm going to add here a header. Now this header will contain the title and then a div with the alerts container. Now the header will be displayed as grid, and I'm also going to use just a bit of style up here before the body tag in a style tag, of course. That's going to display the grid template columns as 1 and 2 fractions, and then it's going to align all the items center. So if I type in here, blah, 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 something, you will see it appearing on the right side. Okay, we don't need this. And a gap of 1. It's going to add a gap of all around of 1. Okay, so this is going to be the header part. As you can see in the finished project, this is where the alerts will appear. So if I'm adding something, a danger alert will appear if I don't fulfill the conditions, and if I'm adding something fulfilling the conditions, then a successful alert will appear. Now this will be a component. Now let's move on to, actually I can close up this. Let's move on to adding our form. Now the form will be where everything will be inputted. This is actually just a simple form. Right underneath the header, we're going to add the form. Within the form, we're going to add a div with the class of form group. It's going to style this input tag automatically. Then input with, so toggle here word wrap again. Then it's going to add a input with a type of text and a ID of text input. This ID will be extremely useful later on. We're going to go onto it in the DOM, and then a placeholder of add a new task. Okay, so this part is also done. Now, when we're outputting our tasks, as you can see down here, we're actually going to output them in a unordered list. So let's add that unordered list, and it's also going to have a ID right after the form of task list. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the HTML file. We can actually close it, or not close it because we will need to grab onto the elements. Let's go to our get elements now. I'm going to comment out everything that we did here. We don't need those h1s and so forth and so on. Also in the return, you know what, I'm going to leave everything that we did until now in here, but I'm going to comment it out. And now comes the interesting part. We're going to grab onto the form. So const form document dot create select. I'm going to select the only form that actually exists in the entire project. So form, that's where I'm not going to give it any kind of ID. Don't notice each time you submit a form, you're actually trying to do something, and that is to refresh the page. So this is the default behavior. Now I'm going to stop this default behavior right in here, right within this module by grabbing onto the form and dot on submit, and then I'm going to assign it to a arrow function with the event in this, and I'm going to e dot prevent default, and this should prevent the default behavior of the form. So now if I'm clicking here, nothing will happen, excepting the information will be submitted when I'm adding some kind of information. Now, in order to have access to the form, I'm going to now export it or return it explicitly within here as form. Now I have access to this form in my main JavaScript file. Now, to demonstrate this, let me just show you. I'm not going to use, you can see it's not logging anything, it's not doing anything, it's just initializing the function. But I'm also going to now destructure from this form that variable. So I'm going to create here const. I'm going to add it to a object and assign it to this function. And from here, I'm going to extract the form. Now I have access to the form. Let me demonstrate this by console logging form, and it should give me the form that is in there. Okay, so this is how modules work. You can do anything almost anything you want, exactly like in JavaScript, and then you can have access to them. Now let's grab onto all of the elements that we need from our DOM here. I'm going to just start and copy the very first one, which was the form, and now grab onto the alerts container, and let's also replace it here. This is going to be a ID. You can also use get element by ID if you wish. Now again, you need to export it in order to have access to it later on. Let's continue on. I'm going to copy and paste it. We're going to grab onto the task and input, and I should now also have, let me just also check this, export it here, task input. I'm going to copy everything that is in here, go to the main file and destructure them here, and also paste them in here. And you should see that, okay, the form is there. Didn't hit save. And we're missing one thing. This is pretty good that they're testing it. So one of them is null, and that is the alerts container. Didn't I rename this alerts? Oh, it was dash container. Sorry about that. So alerts. Oh, you know what? I'm going to rename it here. Alerts container. There we go. Okay, so we have all three. You see how easy it is to debug? Because I know exactly where the problem is then. The next one will be the add task button, which is this one right here. So let's copy in our elements. Let's copy this, paste it down here, and let's copy this, go in here and replace it. Okay, now we're going to export it here and also export it here, and also console log it here. So comma, and should it saved here, and we should see all four of them. Excellent. Now we only need one more thing, that there is the task list where we're going to export all of our tasks. So let's go ahead, copy this, go back to our HTML task lists, and task list will be also returned here, and then go into your main, comma, and return it here, and there we go. You have access to everything. So I'm going to comment out this console log, and we can pretty much close our get elements. That's all the elements that we need. We can close it up. We have access to everything now. Okay, so next up, let's create a component that is going to create, or actually a file that's going to create a task for me. So let's go ahead in modules, create a new file, and let's call it task item.js. And what this will do is going to give me a task item each time I'm going to call upon this function. So we're creating a function. And now I'm going to create a name function. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to export here a function. I'm going to call it task item. And I'm going to call it create task item, because this function will create me a task item. Now, when I'm going to import this file, and let's just console log task item. What am I doing? Console log. There we go. Task item. Now, when I'm importing this file, it needs to be imported exactly as it stands here. Meaning that if I go into my main file and try to import it as a create task item like that, it's going to automatically import it within curly brackets. Now that's the difference between importing or exporting as a default, and I cannot rename this. It needs to have the exact name as what is exported. You can also export multiple functions within one singular file, but if they're not exported as default, which can only be one per module, then it needs to be exported exactly as the file is specified and within curly brackets. Also, we're going to export it from .modules and then task item. So because it is in a modules folder. Now let's go ahead and populate this. Within our export, we're going to create first of all a const of li, and we're going to assign this to the document and then create a element of li. Then we're going to take that element and add to it a class name. So class name, and we're going to add the class name of alert to it. This is just basically a couple of classes that I created, and it's going to be styled automatically. Now to this li, I'm going to add as an inner HTML whatever task will be added to it up here as an argument. So this function will take in an argument, and at the end is going to return that li that we just created. So this function once again will take an argument of task and add it to a li that is creating here with the class of alert. Pretty simple. Now in order to trigger this, we need to add it to our button that is going to add the task. So let's go ahead, go back to the main, and actually we're done with this file, so I'm just going to close it up, go into our main file, grab onto the add task button, add to it a onClick event, assign it to an arrow function, and this is then going to trigger a create task item that's going to take in a task text. Now the task text will be actually the value of the input file that we are using up here, so the value of the input field. So we're going to grab onto the task input and assign it to a variable of const task text, and this will be the task input dot value because it now has access to the value of the task. So whatever text in here is going to be inserted in our function that we are calling from our module and then added to the file, which will be then the task list dot append child, and we're going to append a new element that we're creating, and you can either add this entire thing in here in a parenthesis or create a new variable. I'm going to create a new variable for this, so I'm going to call this const task element and assign it to the create task item, and then pass this in here, and we should now have a task 1, enter, and there we go, we have one task added. Now we also want to clear this field, so right at the end we're going to take care of this by adding task input dot value and we're going to reassign it to absolutely nothing. Okay, so let's try this again. Task 1 and k1, task k1. That's also good. Okay, now we have our tasks. All we need to do now is add a completed effect to it. So for this we're going to go into modules, create a new folder, and create a utility function which is going to be stored in a utility folder. So utilities, or you can edit as util, but I like to name it as utilities. Okay, and within here we're going to create a new file, and let's call it completed tasks, completed task.js. Let's export. Actually, you know what? I'm going to create a function, call it completed task, and then assign is to the function. So what we're going to do now is create another variable that is going to grab onto all of the tasks within the DOM. Now, because at the beginning of the project you do not have any kind of tasks in the DOM, this is why upon creating the task, the function, the completed task function, will be run at the end. Remember, this is still synchronous code. So const, let's call it task, multiple tasks, because we're going to grab onto all of the tasks that are in the document. So we're going to use the document.querySelectAll, and we're going to select from the ID of tasks and list, or task list, we're going to select all of the LIs. Okay, and I should have used here ID. Now we're going to grab onto all of those tasks and use a for each loop on them. And for each task that we're going to loop over, we're first going to check if that task already has a event listen added to it. So if the task dot onClick is null, so there is no event listener of onClick on it, then we're going to perform the task dot onClick, and this time we're going to listen to the event itself. I'm going to change out my keyboard because it's extremely annoying, and we're going to e.target, so event.target.classList, and we're going to toggle on that event or on that class the class of alert-success. Okay, so pretty simple. Now we need to run this in our main file. Now maybe you're asking yourself, why didn't I export this up here? Because I want to show you that you can also export the function down here by just adding it into curly brackets and export completed. Okay, so this is another way you can export it, but I'm usually using export up here. So I'm going to comment this out, but first let me show you this is going to have the same effect. So export, I'm going to import completed tasks. This is going to import it, and we're going to call upon our completed task right down here. So completed task, and calling upon the function here, meaning that after I add a task, so task 1, now it's going to run that function. It's going to grab onto all of the LIs within the document, and now if I click it, it's going to toggle that success class on it. So if you take a look at the element down here, it has now the alert success element on it. If I click on it again, it's going to remove it, so toggle it. Okay, so next up, let's say I want to add a task, click on this button and nothing happens, or actually something does happen. It's going to add a empty task, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that our task is only then added when the field here is completed. So we need to add some kind of security to check this. So I'm going to pack all of this into a if statement that only if a task dot text exists, I'm going to push the text out of here, only if the task value exists, then should the task be added. So now if I click on this task, nothing happens. If I add something in here, then it's going to add a task. Furthermore, now nothing happens. So we need to add some kind of input to the user, or alert the user that you're missing the text here. Now you can achieve this by adding a alert right here on the right side, as I showed you in our finished project. So this alert right here, hey, you need to add a task in order to proceed with your application. So we're going to create another condition, and we're going to say that this right here will only run if a condition is met, and that condition be if the task input dot value is equal to nothing. Then we're going to first of all alert some kind of problem. Okay, so alert task, the string of please enter a task, exclamation mark. Now if it is entered, then we're going to use the else statement, and we're also going to alert that task added, and there we go. So let's try this out. If I try to enter a task without adding something in our field, then it's going to alert please enter a task. If I add a task, then it's going to alert something new. Now this is not the way I want to do it. I want to have here a little element appearing. Now for this, we're going to create a new element. We're going to create a component. So let's go ahead and create a folder called components. And within this folder, I'm going to create a new file called alert. .js. And this time I'm going to show you another thing. I'm going to export a const of alert and assign it to a arrow function, meaning I can also export arrow functions. Okay, so this is a third way you can export, so you don't need to necessarily use a function description here. You can also use const, alert, and arrow function. So let's go ahead and create this alert. Now we're going to create a alert element by using the document.createElement, and we're just going to create a simple div. Now this div, or the new element that we just created, will have a class name. It's going to have actually multiple class names, so we're going to use here backticks. The first name is going to be alert, and then it's going to have a alert, and let's say the default value will be danger, and then another class of fade and alert, which is just a alert, which is just the default class that I created. Need to talk about text again, which is just the default class that I created in the CSS file. Now let's add to the alert some kind of text. So the alert will have a inner HTML of a text that we're going to add to it. So in order to add this text, I'm going to use the text. So this is pretty much like React, if you already noticed it. I'm going to use it up here, but I'm not using a prop, so I'm not using it as a object, I'm just using it as a regular argument. Now in order to have this alert, we need to add it to something, and we're going to add it to this specific part right here, and we need to have access to that part, and we do have access because we just grabbed onto it in our elements. So when I created my get elements, here we also grabbed onto the alerts container. So this is exactly what I'm going to do now. I'm going to grab onto this alerts container, go into alerts, paste it in here. Now we're actually not having access to it, so I need to add it up here as an argument, and then when it's passed down here in the function, we're going to then append child and going to append the newly created alert to our alerts container, and then we're going to return that alert. Okay, so let's try this out. We're going to go to our main file. We're going to import alert, and we're going to use now our alert, but not here, although I could use it here. Actually, I want to name this custom alert, so sorry about that. This should be custom. Go back to the file, rename it custom, and alert. There we go, custom alert. Okay, and also when we're importing it in our main file, it should be custom alert. Okay, so custom alert, I'm going to replace, comment this out, custom alert, and this alert is going to take in, first of all, where it should be displayed. So the alerts container, going to pass in here the alerts container, and as a second argument, we're going to pass in the text. Now you could just add here default value to this as a string of alert, and now I could actually use it. It's going to not appear here. Please add a text. Didn't hit save. I can already use it. You see it appeared and disappeared. And we're going to take care of this in just a couple of seconds. And there we go. The text is alert, but we don't want to use that text. We want to use this text right here. So I'm going to do here comma, and then within quotations, double quotation marks, we're going to use the please alert text string. Okay, so now I should see please enter a task. Now we need to do a couple of things. Let's go back to our alert file and let's take out that fade effect. Actually, we're going to add to the class here, right after the element is created. And after the class, I'm going to alert.style. And now I'm going to add a animation delay to it of a string of 2.6 seconds. Okay. So it's going to delay now that animation of shrinking with 2.3 seconds. Now that animation actually means that it's going to be removed. So we're going to go down here and create a set timeout, and after a time of 3000 milliseconds, which are 3 seconds, this alert should disappear. So I'm going to grab onto the alert and remove it from our DOM. Okay, so let's try this again. Alert, and after 3 seconds, it should shrink. And actually, it's creating the animations, triggering the animation after 2.6 seconds, and the animation takes 3 seconds, and that is why you're seeing that animation, and that is going to be removed from the DOM. Okay, now we're getting here in overtime mode. So this is all we need for our alert element. We're going to close it up. Actually, no, we need to open it up again. Sorry about that. The last thing that I do need here, to toggle over text again, is when I'm adding a successful task, I'm getting this other alert. That's not what I want. I want the same alert, but with another color. And this is where this little fellow comes into play. I'm going to now add, after alert text, I'm going to add the type. And the default type will be danger. So once again, if I replace here type with the variable of, if I replace the danger with the variable of type, the default value will be then still danger. But now I'm going to go to my main element, and instead of this task, I'm going to copy this alert. The text will be task added. I'm going to replace the task, the text, and in here I'm going to add the string of, of success. And now instead of having a danger alert, I'm going to have a task, set here task 1, I'm going to have a successful alert. So that's pretty much it for the project. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you also understood now how modules work. Modules are extremely powerful. I actually created this because I'm basing the new course that I'm creating, which are 50 projects, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And at the end, we're going to have a huge project that is going to be created using modules. So hope you enjoyed this. If you did, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you have any kind of questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comment sections below. Also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, then please consider doing so, and also clicking that notification bell in order to get notified when I post a new video. Also, if you want to support me personally, I have tons of courses and tutorials. You can find them on my YouTube channel and also on my website and on Udemy. So with this being said, wish you all a lovely day. My name is Norbert BM, and bye-bye.